Welcome, everybody. Oh, it's so wonderful to see you all coming today. Welcome. My name is Elise. I'm a member of the Keela customer care team. I'll dive into a little bit more of an intro in a few minutes. While we're getting started, why don't you throw where you're coming to us from into the chat? Make sure you've got it set to everyone so we can all see where you're coming from. I'm really excited to see where everyone is joining us from today. New York, wonderful. I'm already seeing some names of customers that I've helped before, so I'm really excited about that. Oh, lots of folks from Ontario. Oh, wow, lot across Canada. Wonderful. Well, it's so wonderful to see you all today. I'm so excited for today's session. I'm just going to give it one more minute for folks to keep coming in, and then I will dive in with our introduction. For those folks that are just joining us, you can add where you're coming to us from into the chat box. It's great to learn where you're joining us from today. I'm calling in from Hamilton, Ontario, right up the tip of Lake Ontario. And I have already seen some folks who are at least in my area, if not maybe right in my hometown. So hi, neighbors. It's good to see everybody. Wonderful. So many folks coming in. That's fantastic. I love this. This is so great. Oh my goodness. I don't mean to add any pressure, Rohit, but 165 people have already joined the webinar. So this is going to be a great session for these folks. I'm really, really excited about it. Okay, let's get started. People can keep jumping in. You may have noticed that the session is being recorded, just so you're aware. And you will get a copy of this after the session within the next few days. So hello, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here. My name is Elise. I'm a customer support specialist here at Keela. I've worked with several of you before. It's great to see you. Hi. I'm also a former Keela user from a nonprofit, so I have been right where you are. Um, we also have my incredible colleague Chelsea here with us today. She's our digital designer, and she'll be helping out today on the tech side of things. So you might see her in the chat box or answering some of your tech questions. Please give a big shout out to my lovely colleague Chelsea. I do want to acknowledge that Keela's head office is located in Vancouver, which is on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the coastal Salish people, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and give thanks for their generosity and hospitality on these lands and waters. If you're new to Keela, welcome. Keela is a fundraiser CRM, meaning that it is designed with the unique needs of fundraisers like you and me in mind, and aims to unify fundraising, communications, and donor management into one singular source of truth. Before I hand it off to Rohit, I would like to welcome Alex Price and Iman Khan from Imagine Canada and Grant Connect. Iman is a senior coordinator of client success and corporate citizenship with Grant Connect and is going to say a few words today about Imagine Canada and Grant Connect. So right over to you, Iman.
Thanks for that introduction, Elise. Hi, everyone. As you know, I'm Iman, and I'm from Imagine Canada. So today I'm calling in from Toronto, which is located on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat. I'm excited to be here with you all today to learn more about new strategies and approaches in grant writing. The Grant Connect team often publishes content in this area and sometimes even in partnership with Keela, which is published in our monthly Grant Seeker newsletter. So my colleague Alex will be sharing a link in the chat if you are interested in signing up for that as well. Today's topic is very timely and relevant as grant writing is evolving due to the rise of AI and more. One of the things our team has been interested in is finding the balance between the human and digital elements of grant writing. While AI can make grant writing more efficient, what do fundraisers need to do to make their applications and proposals stand out? So before we get started, I am happy to take a moment and talk about Imagine Canada's fundraising platform, Grant Connect. Grant Connect is actually one of Canada's oldest social enterprises, dating back to 1966, when it used to be a big physical book called the Directory, and it's now a software as a service platform whose mission is to help Canadian charities and nonprofits find funding opportunities from foundations, corporations, governments, and more. The platform is specifically designed to make prospect research a seamless process for anyone working on their organization's fundraising portfolio. So that's all for me. If you do want to learn more about Grant Connect or have any suggestions for making the platform more useful for you and your organizations, feel free to email us at grantconnect@imaginecanada.ca, and we'll throw that in the chat as well. And thanks in advance to all of the organizers and Rohit for this very relevant and what I'm sure will be a really informative webinar. Back to you, Elise.
Thank you so much, Iman. I do want to say that as a fundraiser, I have personally utilized Grant Connect and found it to be an incredibly useful tool. So thank you for the work that you do. I don't know if we had any overlap, but I just want you to know that I see you and I appreciate it. Um, should you have any questions during the presentation, please enter them into the chat box or into the Q&A section, and we'll get to as many of them as we can at the end of the presentation. Speaking of the chat box, I've already mentioned this, but I'll mention it again. Please remember to select everyone when you're typing in the chat box so all of our guests can read your comments and your questions. And if you have a question, there's probably a good chance somebody else does too. Finally, this webinar is being recorded and you will receive access to the recording within the next few business days. Now, I am incredibly excited to welcome our expert speaker for today, Rohit Mehta, the founder of DoGood Fundraising. Rohit has been active in the nonprofit and charitable sector for almost 20 years. He has served on the grant review team for both the Ontario Trillium Foundation and the Ministry of Children and Youth Services Youth Opportunities Fund. Rohit has reviewed and assessed over 300 grant applications. When I say expert, I mean it, and was instrumental in distributing over $60 million in funding to community-based nonprofits, charities, and grassroots groups. In 2019, he started DoGood Fundraising to support organizations who are doing good work. Today, the company has a national scope and serves the charitable sector as well as for-profits. $13 million has been successfully raised to date. Rohit has an extensive background in grant writing, prospect research, program development, and evaluation. He is frequently called upon as a speaker among the charity sector and social innovation institutions. He's a critical thinker who challenges the status quo and believes that we have the power to transform society and create a better world. I am thrilled to welcome you today, Rohit, so please take it away.
Thanks so much, Elise and Iman, and thank you to Imagine Canada and Keela for the opportunity to present this webinar. All these organizations are doing really good work, and I hope that folks get a lot of value from today's webinar. So just a little brief note about the company and the name. We recently rebranded to DoGood Funding as part of a partnership with Sheridan College, our local educational institution. And so we now help for-profits as well to do good work. We work in three different ways. We find grants through prospect research. We write grant applications from start to finish through our grant writing service, and we provide professional development training and consulting. If you are interested in any of those services, please reach out to Imagine Canada or Keela for an introduction. And all with the goal, of course, of helping you raise more money. Our tagline is literally, let's raise more money. So in today's presentation, we'll talk about a few things. Firstly, artificial intelligence, the thing that's on everyone's mind. We'll talk about trust-based philanthropy and grant making in a post-COVID environment. I'll talk a little bit about what happens after a grant win or a grant decline within the context of trust-based philanthropy. I'll cover 5 common mistakes in grant writing that I've seen as a past grant reviewer and assessor, but also that we see in our day-to-day work at DoGood. And then finally, we'll open for questions and discussion. And of course, the chat box is open. If you do have a burning question that comes up, please do ask, because other folks are probably thinking the same thing. So let's start by talking about the rise of artificial intelligence and how it's used in granting. I'm going to begin by telling you about 3 technologies which we use every day at DoGood in our work. I'll talk about Microsoft Office, Google Docs, and ChatGPT. And of course, I don't represent any of these companies, and they're not paying me to say this. I just think that there's some good technologies that we should be talking about when we talk about this work. So first of all, Microsoft Office. Microsoft Office came out with a tool during COVID, I believe, that was a speech-to-text tool. It appeared one day, and I curiously clicked it and was surprised by how well it captured speech and put it into text. We're often told at DoGood by clients who we work with across the country that it takes them a long time to write a grant, or getting started can be challenging. I think one of the great things about using AI and specifically speech to text is that you can talk the way you speak, the way you share your story, and the AI can very quickly capture that and write it in a way which is spelled correctly. You can certainly write a lot more using an AI than you can by typing. And it even has auto punctuation, which I was surprised by. Another AI that we literally use every day at Do Good is voice typing through Google Docs. So very often our grants are written from start to finish in Google Docs, and there's a button under Tools. You press the microphone and you type, you talk, and it types. And it's great for those who love speaking. You know, very often I'll be there with my phone, pacing a room and speaking into my phone, and it will type what I'm saying into a Google Doc. It's also great for those who dislike typing, right? So some of us are on our computers so often, you know, we don't enjoy typing that much anymore, or maybe we find it to be time consuming. So it can be a really great tool, and it is free. Now, the other thing in Google Docs is that you can use voice commands to edit your text format. There's actually a ton of things you can do. I didn't go into it in detail here. But if you go on Google Voice and you click the help section, this box opens up and it starts to teach you how to use this AI. I think it's really important that our sector not just embraces AI, but learns how to use it effectively so that we can continue to do good work. And so these are some examples on the right side of your screen of some of the things you can do simply using voice commands in Google Docs. Another thing you probably noticed in the last few years is that predictive text just showed up one day and started working. You'll literally be typing a comment and it will finish your sentence. And I've observed that it's actually gotten a lot more accurate. So it will accurately be able to predict what we're thinking or saying, especially in our grant review and assessment work. And this idea of smart compose is shown on the screen there. You know, someone's writing there were, and then it plans to finish the sentence by saying other explorations, and it's picking up on where that comment is coming from. So oftentimes text has been highlighted, then you press the comment button, and it's actually reading that text and it's trying to assess what are going to be the next words. If you press tab on your keyboard, it will finish your sentence. This might sound minor, but this is really significant. We do about 200 grants per year at Do Good and growing, and this saves a lot of time. Now, I just left a major conference in Ontario, and there was a huge section on AI. I believe it was someone from Microsoft who was speaking who said, if you can save 10 to 11 minutes per day using AI, you can make massive improvements in your productivity. So I really encourage you to think about how you can incorporate these tools into your granting efforts to not just save time, but come up with better grants. And of course, this comment tool here is really great for providing feedback, revisions, and collaborating with your colleagues on a grant. ChatGPT, you may have heard of it. It is really taking over in so many aspects of our work. We know a lot of organizations are using this technology. I still talk to some folks who are sometimes a bit hesitant about it. My biggest advice is to use it. Just create a free account and get started with it. You can use it to condense text that's very heavy or very wordy. You can use it to join bullets of text, which we love to do at Do Good because it's often just bridging concepts that we're feeding into the technology. You can use it to improve the structure of your writing, especially if the writing is not flowing very well. It has a mechanism that allows it to flow. You can improve tone. So sometimes if I'm having a difficult conversation or writing a challenging email, I'll write it and then I'll ask ChatGPT to help improve the tone, make it more professional. And you can use it to improve word choice. It can even suggest words for you if you're stuck and you're not sure what word to use to describe your program or your impact. You can put in some text and say, can you rephrase this? Can you reword this? Okay, so I'm going to walk you through an actual example. I took some screenshots of this so that I could share this. Here's what I said to ChatGPT. I said, I'm writing a new grant application to a government funder on behalf of a nonprofit organization. It's focused on seniors. Can you help me join a few bullets of text into a paragraph? So here, what I did was I didn't tell it exactly who I'm working with. I didn't give it too much data. what I just said to it was, here's the context. It's a grant. It's for government. It's on behalf of a nonprofit. The topic is seniors. And so right away, the technology is picking up on a lot of those variables and it's preparing itself for the answer it's going to give. It's not going to be writing about bananas or animals. It's going to be writing about a nonprofit organization doing good work for seniors, and it's going to write for a government audience. This is really important, and these prompts help to prepare your AI to focus on the task ahead. So it says, of course, I'd be happy to help you. And it says, please provide me with the bullets. So you can see underneath that what I did was I started providing a number of bullets, right? I talked about it being an exclusive workshop. There was the dance yoga aspect. It's going to be led by a dance therapist. So I'm telling it a lot of information. I think when we use AI, we need to give it a lot of our ideas. We don't want it to come up with ideas on its own. This is actually called hallucinating, I believe, and AI can do that. It can just start generating ideas if you don't tell it what to do. So please tell your AI what you want it to do when you're granting or drafting a grant. And so what I did was literally from my Google Doc, I took my bullet points and I put it into Chat GPT. So you can see here a screenshot of the Google Doc. There's the bullets that I grabbed, shown by the arrow there. And then I took the answer and I put it back into my Google Doc. So what you can see is it's no longer bullets. The bullets are striked out at the bottom. And what we have now is we have a paragraph. It has some adjectives and some connecting words. I find sometimes the adjectives are a little bit over the top. So you need to have a human actually revise these and change the tone to make it reflect your own language. For example, the word elegant appears here, and intricate, and our cherished seniors. I wouldn't write like that, and so I actually took out some of those high. I would almost call them flowery adjectives, and I put in some adjectives that I would be more likely to use. Okay, so this is how ChatGPT can simply be used to actually bridge some bullet points in your writing. And you can see how that looks now in our Google Doc there. Another example. So I said, hello, I'm writing a grant application. The question is, and I used quotes, please provide the activities and their timelines that will be taking place as part of this proposed project. I said, again, can you help me put together the bullet points into something concise? So here, what I've done is I've given it context. I've given it the exact question in quotes. I don't want it to change that question. I want it to understand it exactly and precisely. And ChatGPT says, of course, I'd be happy to help you craft a concise answer for your grant. Please provide the bullet points, So we did, and look at what it did. This was incredible. It gave two separate responses for how it interpreted my inquiry, and I could choose between those responses. Now, I'm not going to compare and contrast these. We'll provide some slides, and you can have a look at this if you'd like. But they are subtle and they are different, and it will often give you this sort of dynamic of two options, and then you choose the right one. And of course, the technology is learning. It's learning from us. It's learning how we think. It's learning how people make choices, and this information is being fed back to the company that owns this, and they're using it to improve the AI. So just keep that in mind. You are actually helping to develop the product further, and probably helping to help that company make more money. Nonetheless, a great tool. Okay, here's 5 other useful tools that I love and use every day. Google Calendar is so important. Use it for scheduling. Use it for taking notes. It literally says, take meeting notes in blue. It automatically creates a document for you, and it puts the title of your meeting and the time and who is invited. You can invite your colleagues easily, and you can see people's availability. We use this at DoGood across the organization. It is free. I highly recommend that folks consider using this. There is a paid version of Google Apps as well, which offers you a little bit extra, like conference calling. Airtable. Took me a few months to get convinced, but this really has changed the game in my business. We use it to record work hours. We use it to tally hours. It's basically a much better version of Excel because every cell can be linked to each other. So the way I like to describe it is if you write Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and if you click on Monday, every single spreadsheet that features the word Monday can appear right then and there. It's something that Excel can't really do. And so Airtable is really great if you use a lot of spreadsheets or if you want to have relational information that's shared among sheets that talks to each other. I think the starting plan is free, and then there's a more premium version. Okay, Google Docs, of course, I've talked about Google Docs already. We love it for peer review. We love it for leaving notes. It's also great for suggestions. So you have a suggesting mode. If you see on the top of the cutout there, it says, I added some text. I added, specifically, we will use the $15,000 in requested funding, etc. So what I did was I suggested something, and then the viewer can decide if they want to accept or decline my suggestion, right? So this is a really great way to edit and contribute to your colleagues' work. They can see every keystroke. They can see who contributed to it. It even has version history, which is a whole other thing that allows you to go back in time. You ever accidentally deleted some text and then panicked, like, where's that text? You can go back in time and restore that version. And it's something we use quite a bit in our work to look at how our colleagues are doing work. Okay, Google Meet, we're on Zoom. Zoom is great. Google Meet is also great. What I find is they're coming up with innovative aspects within Google Meet that allows you to do things that almost no other sort of conferencing technology is doing. So one thing they just put out was that you can have a Google Meet within a Google Doc. Essentially, everybody in the Google Meet is looking at the same doc, but can collaborate at the same time. A little different from screen sharing. But even the screen sharing option is fantastic. We use this to review budgets quite a bit with our clients. So we'll put up a budget, we're editing in real time. They're seeing our edits, they're making suggestions. It's absolutely seamless. I use it on mobile all the time, computers, tablets, you name it. Really effective tool. And the last piece of AI that I'm going to talk about is HubSpot. HubSpot is a free software, which you can pay a premium version for as well. And what we love about it is it allows you to log emails. Have you ever reached out to funders and then had your staff member leave, and now you have to go into their email inbox just to find that correspondence with the funders? Well, HubSpot allows you to very simply check mark a box, and that email gets logged into a system. And even 5 years down the road, if you're wondering, hey, did we ever receive funding from this organization? You can go back and read the correspondence with that funder. Even if you talk to 5 different people at that funding organization, you can still read the correspondence because it's logged. And so we log all of our emails. We use it to troubleshoot. We use it to help out when one of our colleagues is sick and somebody else needs to step into their place. It allows you to add notes. You can log calls. You can put contact information in there. They really should be paying me to say this, but this is an excellent piece of technology, and it's a CRM, and it starts at a free plan. So do consider these technologies to do good work in your organization. Okay, moving ahead to the ethical use of AI. This is so important. So many of our clients are talking about AI, and they're talking about how can we use it in a way that's good and ethical and transparent. I want to start by saying that we always use humans in our granting. We start by conducting an analysis to look at what are the questions being asked in a grant, what are they really getting at, and how can we answer them effectively. We always answer our questions using our own ideas first. We do the hard work of grant writing. And if we use an AI to bridge bullet points, for instance, we go back and check that we're actually still answering the question. My personal belief is that you can augment using AI. You can save time, you can reduce administrative efforts, but I don't think you should be relying on AI exclusively for your work. I think the ethical use of AI is to use it as a tool, right? And to use it to, like I said, augment your proposals and your grants, as opposed to relying on it as a whole. I had someone say to me, hey, Rohit, I think we're just going to throw this in ChatGPT and see what happens. We're going to send it to the funder and see what happens. And I really recommend that you don't ever put all your information in one ChatGPT box, spit out an answer, and just submit it to a funder. It will probably get declined. And most folks can actually figure out when you've used ChatGPT and not modified it at all, right? So the ethical use of AI, using it as a tool. Do use AI to improve spelling and grammar. I definitely recommend you use it to join words, bullets, or to condense information. That's a very effective use of the tool. And you can use it to improve word choice. I talked about this before, where if you're struggling with what word to use or how do you fit within this 150 word limit, it can help you. As I said, please don't use it to write your answers in a grant from scratch. That's a big no-no. The other thing you don't want to do is to feed one answer and then ask it to almost infer the next one, right? Because it's just a tool and it's really quite limited unless you've been feeding it answers for the last year and it has a thorough understanding of every single thing you do in your organization. It's probably not going to be able to take information from one answer and infer another. I also don't recommend that you use AI to write lengthy sections of text. I use it in very small sections of text. It allows me to maintain some control over what's written, and it allows me to really review it and understand it. If you're writing 5 pages of text, chances are you may miss some of the flowery language that gets inserted or some of the other things that it does. It sometimes makes up facts. That's been seen. So beware of the AI and beware of the text that's in there, and always use a human to double check that work. Okay, trust-based philanthropy and how are we grant making in a post-COVID world? So what is trust-based philanthropy? It really is an approach that allows you to reimagine the relationships between donors, between organizations who are doing good work, and it's about rebalancing power and decision making. I want to say that it's really meant to uplift nonprofits, so that's super important to uplift you and your team and the good work you're doing. It's about prioritizing relationships over transactions, right? So whereas maybe granting used to have a transactional approach, in a post-COVID world, it is a relationship approach. Think of it as connecting with your funder beyond the check, right? So some folks will receive a payment, they'll thank the funder, and that's it. Trust-based philanthropy is much deeper than that. Okay, so first of all, it's about institutional relationships. I really think that if you want to be funded for the long term, you must build a relationship with your funders. You should have conversations about your work. And when we do prospect research and we come up with a foundational funder, the first thing we tell our clients is that we should jump on a call with the funder and see if what we're proposing is even a good fit. They're going to appreciate that so much. And I can tell you that most organizations actually don't do this yet. They don't get on a call. They don't reach out to the funders. But it's interesting that they all know each other. Funders talk to each other, right? Even at the conference I was just at, there were a ton of funders in the room who literally have years of experience working with each other. Different folks have worked at different institutions. And so because they're well connected, there's a huge benefit to you building a relationship with a funder. They will talk to their friends, they'll talk to their colleagues, and if you're doing good work, it will spread. Right? So that's institutional relationships. Trust-based philanthropy is about corporate engagement. I can tell you that corporate groups want to be involved deeply. They want deeper engagement with your organization. And I used to do volunteer management, and we used to bring in groups, banks, insurance companies, and they wanted to help out. They wanted to roll up their sleeves and get involved. And so they're more likely to fund you if you're willing to offer deeper engagement. Now, corporations use systems to streamline their requests for grant applications. There's online portals that they use. Sometimes they have their own application forms. But again, I really think it's about reaching out to them, having a connection, knowing somebody who works at that bank or that insurance company that you're applying for funding for, and making sure that you're local or you're within the communities that they serve. That makes you more likely to get the grant, but it also makes more sense for the corporation that wants to engage where they serve locally, right? So that's trust-based philanthropy on corporate engagement. And then I want to say that trust-based philanthropy is also about diversifying your funding. In a post-COVID world, where 1 in 5 organizations was about to shut down in 2020, we have to make sure that our revenues are diverse and sustainable, right? We don't know what's going to happen next with the economy. We don't know, what government is going to come in and how that's going to affect funding. And so we, as I guess, funders want to fund organizations who have revenues that are not just based on one specific revenue generation stream or one specific funder. They want diversity. Okay. On grant applications, you'll often see this question: what is your previous history of managing successful projects? What is your past history of success? Tell us about the programs and projects that you've run that were similar. What they're really getting at is, do you have a track record of successfully delivering this program or this project? Have you done successful projects within the same budget amount that you're asking us to fund? If so, you're more likely to get that grant. You need to tell them how much money you've won in the past, what were the size of those projects, what was the outcome, when did they take place, who was the funder. And so when you can show that you have past successful funding endeavors, or that you have other sources of funding, you have grants, you have donations, you have special events, maybe you have third-party giving, for instance. This diversity really allows your funders to see that you have sustainability in your work. And if you have a past history of success, you're more likely to receive more grants in the future. And I want to say that when you do this right, when you do trust-based philanthropy right, it allows your organization to have more time, more space, more support, and to really respond to the needs of your community. But then for funders, they actually gain a better understanding of your work. You really want them to be thought partners in your work, right? So everything I've been talking about here with trust-based philanthropy, this helps to move the needle forward for organizations, for funders, and I hope that helps. I'm going to talk about what happens after a grant win or decline. This comes up quite a bit in our work, and so I just want to talk about how important it is to not only have a relationship with your funders, but show them that you care whether your grant is successful, whether it's declined, and take some steps after that. So after a grant win, awesome, you won the grant, look at the funder correspondence, look at the letter they sent you, and then take some time to reread the application that you won, right? Take some time to look back at that, because maybe it's been 3 months since you submitted it. Maybe the person who submitted the grant isn't even there anymore, right? Grant agreements are very important. Never share any news about a grant until you're allowed to. And join the funder on an orientation call if they invite you to one. I think it's important to engage with the funder and participate in whatever it is that they're organizing, because now you've won a grant, so you want to show up for those engagements. You have to track and measure your projects. This is so important in effective granting. And so I talked about technologies like Airtable earlier. You can use something like that to track, are you achieving your deliverables? You want to report on the results. Whether or not the funder is asking you to, you should give them some sort of an update or some sort of a response on the project that you're organizing. Most often you'll have to write a report, but sometimes the reports can be very basic. And if you're moving the needle on impact for, let's say, young people in your community, and you're finding that you're moving the needle, you're hitting your targets, you're achieving them, maybe you're exceeding them, let the funder know that in real time. After a grant win, a reminder that you often have to keep receipts and that sort of thing, and that you have to inform funders as you progress. Whether you're doing well or whether the project's not going so well, keep up that communication channel, and that goes back to the trust-based philanthropy. You have a relationship with them. It's critical that you're actually updating the funder and letting them know how things are going. Okay, after you win a grant, you can sometimes have challenges. So I just alluded to this by saying maybe your project is not on track. What I suggest is you contact the funder. If your costs are exceeding the budget, right? So you have this situation where for whatever reason, maybe costs have gone up ever since you started the proposal, ever since you drafted the proposal, and now your costs are exceeding the budget, let the funder know right away. There are flexible allowance sometimes where you can move a little bit of funding from one budget area to the other, but you have to contact the funder first. If you ever feel like you can't fulfill a funding agreement, this is again about trust-based philanthropy. You let the funders know right away, like ASAP. Like you get on the phone, this thing has happened, we've lost a staff member, or we're losing our space, or something critical has taken place. And then at that point, you can hopefully make some amends or figure out some flexibility, adjust some timelines, modify the budget. There's always things that you can do. And then any emergencies, I recommend that you contact the funder. We've seen all sorts of things in the years that we've been doing this work. And I can tell you that those folks who reach out, like when in doubt, they reach out, it certainly leads to good outcomes. So if you had a grant decline, if a grant didn't go so well, that's okay. The first thing I want you to do is to read feedback from the funder. So whether they've given you an email or a letter, often very generic, often letting you know that the grant application didn't meet the requirements, lots of folks were declined, that sort of thing. Read it, understand it, go back to the grant application, review it, assess where you think you might have made some mistakes, and then schedule a call. This is a big one that I recommend folks do because funders want to give you feedback. A lot of them are actually mandated to give you feedback as part of their process. And very few people actually ask for that phone call. So please ask for the call, take notes, ask questions. We'll join anybody on a call, even if we didn't write the grant. We'll join folks on a call because it's a great learning for us. We've probably had probably 50 or 60 of these calls, and we've just learned so much by talking to funders, and then we take those nuggets and we utilize it to help folks win more money and do more good work. If your grant has been declined, always indicate your interest in a resubmission if you are actually interested. Consider all the feedback that the funder provided and then rewrite your grant and resubmit it. When I was on the grant review team with the Ontario Trillium Foundation, we had folks who would get a grant decline and then they would take our feedback, and then the next year or after 2 years we would see them resubmit. And I remember saying out loud, wow, it looks like they incorporated all the feedback that we gave them. Of course we should approve this grant, right? Once a funder has provided feedback and the applicant makes those revisions or changes, of course funders are more likely to fund that good work. So what I say is grant declines are actually opportunities. Okay, very briefly, 5 common mistakes in granting. I'm just going to zip through this. These are some things that we've seen at DoGood and even if in my work as a reviewer. Top 5 mistakes, number 5, starting from scratch. So when you're working on a grant application, I think it's so important you never start with a blank page. You have a lot of this information that you've submitted to other grants, so I want you to maybe keep it in a Google Docs folder, for instance, or a Dropbox folder. That is your annual budget. So what does it actually cost to operate your organization and all of its programs? Your grant archive. Okay, so it's so critical that you actually archive all your past grants, whether it's in Microsoft Word or Google Docs. Keep those documents somewhere so that your team and the next generation of your team can access those. And then common attachments, articles of incorporation, your budget, your balance sheet, income statement. You're going to get asked for this stuff all the time. So you might as well keep it in a folder, keep it updated every time you're doing this work. Top 5 mistakes, number 4, spelling and grammar. Come on, we have Grammarly, right? We have Google Docs, we have Microsoft Office. We really should not be having spelling and grammar errors in 2024. It makes the proposals hard to read. Sometimes your reviewers can be frustrated by the mistakes. I've seen grant applications with terrible spelling and grammar mistakes to the point where I literally couldn't understand what it said. And I think that AI can actually be very helpful. AI will automatically fix your spelling and grammar mistakes. Obviously, a human needs to double check them, but the little red squiggly line that used to appear sometimes when you're writing your grants, it doesn't always appear on those grant portals, but it does appear in Microsoft Word or Google Docs. And already it allows you to click and it has a suggestion for how to correct that word, and you can just correct it. That is an AI feature as well. And so when you're authoring your proposals, consider doing it in those systems, in Word, in Google Docs, and not so much on the funders portal. I can't tell you how many times people will call me and say, hey, Rohit, we were working in the portal and we lost everything. The portal deleted everything. Used to happen a lot in early COVID. And we have a policy where we exclusively work in Google Docs. We don't even work in portals. We actually duplicate the portal, put it in Google Docs so that never happens. And like I say, all proposals should be thoroughly reviewed. If you're reading out loud and the text flows very nicely, then your reviewer is also going to be happy with it. Top 5 mistakes. Number 3, submitting late applications. We all do it. It's 11:59, you're sweating, you're about to press the submit button, you get that circle of death that is loading. You never want that to happen. We, in the early days at DoGood, saw portals crash often because we were submitting things a little bit closer to the deadline. We have a policy now, we submit 24 hours to 48 hours before the deadline. Oftentimes, you're going to not have the system crash because most of Canada is submitting right at the last minute, but you've attended this webinar and you know now that you should be submitting in advance as much as possible. It's like applying to a job. When the resumes come in, the folks who submit their resumes earlier, they get a really thorough review. The reviewer, in that job competition is looking at that resume carefully. When all the 50 or 100 resumes come in, in the last few hours, they're not getting the same attention. This is how it works in granting. If you apply early, you're going to get more attention to your applications. It's going to be reviewed at a deeper level, and chances are you have a higher chance of success because you were early, you were ahead. Always save a copy before you press submit. Nothing more embarrassing than asking the funder for the grant that you applied for because you can't find it. And when in doubt, reach out to the funder. Please don't be shy about that. Even if you're late, this is the thing. Folks have come to me and said, Rohit, we just missed the deadline by 2 minutes, or someone will say, well, I didn't submit this thing because it was too late. Did you know you can actually reach out to funders with an attachment of your grant, and sometimes they'll offer you some flexibility, right? So let's say something happened and the portal was loading and you passed the deadline by 1 or 2 minutes. If you can reach out to your funder and say, unfortunately, this error happened, sometimes they actually can let you still submit the grant. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll say, yep, we got lots of complaints from lots of folks that the portal crashed, no problem. We're actually going to reopen it for 24 hours. Or we're going to allow you to go back and make a modification or submit the grant again. We saw a lot of that in the early days, especially early COVID. Doesn't happen a lot anymore. I think most funders have started fixing these problems, but portals crash, right? A lot of folks are applying to grants. So definitely reach out to your funder, but more importantly, submit your application on time or early. Top 5 mistakes. Number 2, using too much jargon. You have to write your grant so that folks get it. And by folks, I mean people just like us. There's ordinary people who sit on grant review committees. I was on a community review committee, and there were other folks who were publicly appointed to do that as well. They don't know your acronyms. They don't know your short forms. Many of us work within subsectors within the nonprofit and charitable sector, and so we'll use specific jargon that they might not understand, right? So keep your language simple. I have a note here to be careful if you use AI because sometimes the word choice can be unusual. I talked about flowery adjectives. It also sometimes inserts words that are overly complicated or words that maybe we don't even use day to day. I did have to look up a word that I don't use every day. I think it was eschew. And if there's a word that you're not familiar with, you're not going to get it, and your reviewer might not get it either. A tip is to have a friend or family member review your proposal. They might be familiar with your work, and if they look at your proposal and they read it and they say, yeah, this makes sense, then you're probably more likely to be successful. If somebody close to you is looking at it and they've already heard you talk about your organization and your work and they still don't get it, chances are your reviewer isn't going to get it either. The top 5 most common mistakes in granting. Number 1, not answering the question. This is literally the most common mistake. This happens all the time. Folks will write an answer to another question and not answer the question in the grant proposal. Funders are expecting that you've actually rewritten your proposal, or you've thoroughly reviewed it, or you've written it from scratch, but you've done a really good job. They're not expecting that you're there at the last minute, drafting a proposal and trying to get it in, because those proposals aren't that well written. So reread your responses, maybe put away the proposal, come back after an hour, look at it again, and you can catch your own mistakes. And a tip, they teach us in school not to plagiarize, but sometimes when a question is being asked, you can put parts of that question right in your answer. So, tell us about the impact that your program will achieve in the community. The impact that our program will achieve in the community is XYZ, right? Avoid fluff, which is, overly fancy adjectives and putting unnecessary statistics and making grandiose statements. I find ChatGPT does this a lot. If you ask it to synthesize some text, often the last sentence will be like an over-the-top statement. I often just remove that because I call it fluff. I think it's a little bit serious sometimes. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to turn it back to the team at Imagine and Keela. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and let's have an open discussion with
Well, Rohit, that was amazing. I learned so much. If I ever do end up back in the fundraising world, I definitely know who I'm coming to for grant information. We had so many questions come in the chat, and we also had a few questions that came in before our call today. And one is that I just want to address. Catherine asked, what is the best approach for finding capital funding via grants when most funders aren't providing this kind of support?
Excellent. So capital funding is one of the hardest ones to find. And the challenge is that so few funders offer this. So Grant Connect is actually a great place to look because it allows you to specify which type of funding you're looking for. And capital funding is a very specific requirement that you can actually put in the drop down, select it, and it will show you those opportunities. The other thing I want to say is that you can sometimes ask a funder to provide a capital item as part of your grant. So, for instance, you need a few computers for your youth program. Even though they don't explicitly say that they'll fund capital, you can ask. You can say, we have this $10,000 ask. We need these computers. Would you consider funding it? You'd be surprised that you can often squeeze that into a budget if the funder is amenable to it.
That's great. Thank you so much. We had quite a few questions about using ChatGPT for writing grant applications. So I'm going to ask a few of those if you don't mind. Madison asked, can a reviewer tell if you're using ChatGPT, and would there be any chance that they penalize you for this?
Brilliant. We actually talked about this quite a bit at the conference that just took place over the last few days. It was a gathering of all the Ontario nonprofits, and it's interesting that you can tell the average person who works in granting is usually pretty attuned to writing and being able to understand writing. You can tell from the structure of how something is written. You can often tell if GPT is used. GPT not only uses over the top adjectives, the flow of the writing is very particular. Can they penalize you for it? Not yet. So we don't have any laws that govern the use of GPT, or organizations who are offering funding have not put anything in place. We look at grants all the time, and I've never seen anyone say, please don't use AI in your writing, or we will penalize for the use of AI. However, what I have seen is funding institutions have asked in the past, are you using a third party to write your grant? Are you outsourcing this, or are you doing this in-house? So what they're suggesting is that the groups who are outsourcing, let's say, to another country or to a service provider, sometimes the organizations may look at you differently versus when your own staff are doing the work, or your own board members, or your own volunteers. So there's a difference there. Give it 2 years, and you're probably going to see funders saying something like, we discourage the use of GPT. And the reason why is they're going to start getting grant applications that look the same. The other thing is they're going to start getting grant applications that read very well, but then when the funder is actually reading it, they're going to say, well, this doesn't make sense. And I know it is human nature for us to use a tool that makes our life easier. So I know folks are going to put their grants in ChatGPT, throw it at the wall, and see if it sticks. And that's when funders are going to start probably raising the concern, and probably declining grants that are purely written by AI. So in other words, have the human element so that you don't get penalized. But right now, nobody is penalized.
That's great. And actually, your response leads right into our next question. Alia is asking, or Alia, I'm not sure, and I apologize if I pronounced your name wrong. If there's a way to teach Chat GPT to learn more about the tone of writing of that specific organization, or is it just kind of everybody is teaching Chat GPT at the same time?
Okay, so it's interesting. When you start a question, okay, so go back to the example that I shared, and it was something like, hi, ChatGPT, I'm writing a grant for seniors in the nonprofit sector. There's some dance element here. It's a government grant. What it does is it opens a conversation. And if you look on the left side, it gives that conversation a name. It uses AI to make up a name. When you start a new conversation, like I'm like, oh, I'm going to, a resort, help me find the 5 best restaurants, it'll open a new conversation. If you go back to that conversation, the first one, and you add more information, you say, okay, GPT, today I'm going to tell you about the impact that our program is making on seniors. Boom, 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 boom. Or you'll say, I want to give you a little bit of a high level summary of how we've been able to make a difference in the past year, how we've been able to move the needle on impact for 50 seniors in our community. the more text you feed it, right, the more it's going to understand not just the context, but also how you write, how you think, and your tone. So there was a conversation that I kept coming back to. I think it was the conversation about like, can you make this more professional? Can you improve the tone? And what I found was it started writing like me because it kept seeing my tone and how I write, and it started using words that I use. And this is, I think this is called machine learning, where the AI learns and improves from you as an individual. But then, as you said, it's also like taking all the data from all over the world and it's using that to improve. So in summary, have a conversation and label that conversation and go back to that one again and again. And the more information and tone that you feed in, the more it's going to reflect you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Um, these two questions are kind of tied together, so I'm going to ask them at the same time. When we were talking about ChatGPT and connecting bullet points together, Joanne asked that in some grant apps, would it not be more useful and easier to read to utilize bullet points? And someone responded in the chat saying that scanning softwares tend to prefer full sentences as opposed to bullet points. And then Wing asked, is it common for funders to use scanning software? So I just thought I'd put all of those together into one little question for you.
Yeah, I think both folks are right that writing using bullet points can be easier, and it actually is allowed. Funders do say very often in allowing granting to, as part of trust-based philanthropy, in allowing grants to meet people where they're at, you can use bullet points, and they won't penalize you for that. And even I encourage that. With 150 word limit, sometimes you don't actually have space to write nicely flowing sentences. That being said, scanning software, if it's not here, it's coming. And I'll tell you why. The number of organizations that are doing good work are increasing. The number of requests are increasing. I mean, quite frankly, the number of people with a computer and with access to the internet has gone up dramatically over the last few years. As a result, funders are receiving more requests. As a result, funders are having to assess more requests. How do you do that, right? You can't keep hiring and hiring more staff. Some of these are corporations. One year they're doing well and their foundation is giving out $10 million. The next year they're not doing too well. They're probably giving out only 5. So their solution is going to have to be to use AI. Are they going to use, that technology that you mentioned? Absolutely. Why wouldn't they, right? If it's available, if that technology can be used effectively, it's going to save them time. It's going to save them money. Therefore, more money goes to grantees. I'll give you an example. You may have heard a few years ago that popular websites like Indeed were using an automation to pick up on words from your resume. What would happen is the job posting would have words and then your resume would have words and it would look for a match. And on the employer side, it tells you the percentage match. What it's really saying is out of the words in your job posting and the words in the candidate's application, how many of them are the same, right? So back in the day when I used to apply for work, of course I would use keywords from the job posting in my resume. That's just smart. So funders are going to be looking for this as well. So let's get ahead of the curve. If the funder is talking about youth and you call it adolescence, maybe you should call it youth. If they're using the word youth, they're looking for that in your writing. If the funder talks about strategies for measuring social isolation and loneliness, and you keep calling it mental health, but they're calling it social isolation and loneliness, use their language because they're looking for those words. And the more those words appear in your writing, the more the AI is going to pick up on it. And it's a sad reality that in the future, most granting and the reviewing will be done by an AI first. I wouldn't be surprised.
That's great. Thank you. And you already touched on this in your last answer, but one person asked, how would you cut down on character counts or how do you keep those in check when you've got such low ones, 150 words?
Yeah, this is a really hard thing for me to do as well. Sometimes I'm sitting there agonizing because I'm like, 200 words and every single word is important. What I do sometimes is I will fiddle with ChatGPT and I'll say, hey, I have this paragraph of text. Can you rewrite this within a 200 word limit? Now, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That part I haven't figured out. What you can also do is manually, as the intelligent human that you are, is you can go through your writing and you can sometimes cut words. Like an example might be, I go to the store all the time. Okay, you can take all the time and just replace that with often. I go to the store often. Now you've saved some characters, right? And so that is something that we are way better than any AI. We can do this very quickly, but AI can also be used as an effective tool. Just beware that sometimes it doesn't listen to you when you ask it to keep it within 200 words, it goes over. And if anyone figures that out, let me know.
Excellent. Francesca, oh, and then that was Elizabeth who asked that question, by the way. So sorry. Francesca asked, how do you recommend reaching out to funders for feedback on declined grants when they use a grant portal system like Benevity and there's no contact name or email or phone number included? Or if this is piggybacking with Alicia's question, many don't want to engage or specifically say not to engage. How do you get those relationships to develop?
Yep, trust-based philanthropy is about transparency. And so the ones who choose not to engage or don't want to, I'm sorry, but there's not a lot that can be done there. It's really, um, there's no legislation that governs that they have to, unless they're a government funder. Government funders are taxpayers' money. You have a right to obtain feedback on your grant. When you can't find the contact information, this is where my detective hat comes on. And what I'll do is I'll call the organization, let's say it's a corporation, and I'll ask to speak to somebody in their foundation. And sometimes you can find the right person and you can say, look, we applied for this grant. We'd just like some feedback. I remember there was a major bank, and I remember having to follow up with them multiple times until we finally got a meeting with them. It required some effort. But you know what's great? Resources like Grant Connect actually have contact information. And I find that some funders will not make their contact information public, but when you subscribe to a paid prospect research technology, it's in there. And we know this because we subscribe to that technology and a few others. And we use it to look up contact information for funders. And then when we have a burning question that our clients can't answer, we reach out to those funders and say, hey, foundation, hey, private, public foundation, can you give us some information here because we can't find this anywhere? And they often will. Well, when it comes to feedback, it is interesting that you will get a decline email. And so if you respond to that email, you should be able to get through to the right person. If you haven't heard from anyone, that's also a great opportunity to reach out and say, hey, our board of directors was wondering about the status, and then you can have that conversation with that funder. If you're really stuck, please reach out and we can help.
Brilliant. We are coming just to the end of our presentation or of our time, but Melissa asked if you had any books or resources or anything like that on grant writing that you would recommend people look at.
So I think there's not one that immediately comes to mind, but I think, Imagine Canada and Keela are putting on these great webinar series. Like there's a lot of information here. It's really useful. I was going through social media and preparing for this webinar and looking at some of the other ones that are coming up. I actually encourage you to access those because I think, in this day and age where there's so much information, you really need some thought leaders to help us bring it together and help us as a sector to be able to get the right information and put it right in front of us. And so I think the folks who put on this webinar are thought leaders, and I encourage you to follow them on social media. That is a great resource. And then there are resources that are often shared. They'll talk about podcasts. They'll talk about really great literature. So have a look at those social media channels, especially for Imagine Canada and Keela, and you'll start to see some really great resources.
Thank you so much. I have learned so much in today's session, and I hope the other folks who attended have as well. Thank you so much, Rohit, and thank you for everyone for joining. Before we go, I do want to let everyone know that there is going to be a very short survey that's going to pop up right after the session. It'll only take about 20 seconds to complete, but we would greatly appreciate hearing your feedback. So I just hope you'll take a moment to fill it out. Our next webinar is going to be on June the 13th, 2024, and it's called Let's Talk About Core Funding, a panel discussion. It looks like it's going to be excellent, so I highly recommend you attend. We also hope that you'll check that out. And I think Chelsea is going to put the link in the chat box as well. Thank you all so much for attending today. I hope you have the best Thursday. And for anyone who has a long weekend coming up like me, I hope you have a really great one and enjoy it. Thank you so much, folks, and have a really lovely day. Bye-bye.